we'll wind it down with this. But one thing that I noticed, and kind of goes back to this the small discipline, and is when you bring me a dream, when you start to think outside the box or whatever, my first thing is think, then listen, then think, then respond.
So good.
So when you say, "Hey, I got something for you to that," well, we just had a talk this morning. You say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm going to discuss something with you," and I don't mean it in a bad way. Well, the first thought can be, they say that they mean it in a bad way, but instead it's think, is she on my side? For me, against me? He's for me. So now I want to listen. So listen to what you had to say, then think, how do I respond to let you know what I heard? And I'm not against it. You know, now I fail at that every day because it's a learning process. It's something
But
that
it's a daily discipline that you
it's a
do
daily
practice.
discipline that
Yeah.
I am working on. Well, welcome to Pillow Talk. I'm Grant. This is my wife, Stephanie. And after almost 38 years of marriage, we've discovered how to communicate for better understanding and yoke our differences to pull stronger toward a common purpose.
As certified marriage coaches, we want to help reignite passion and connectedness in your marriage through intimate, authentic, and unguarded conversations. Now let's have some pillow talk.
Hey, welcome to Pillow Talk. We are back for another video cast podcast combo, I guess you'd say.
Here we are.
Here we are. We have been discussing 15 laws to thrive in marriage. And we based this off the book, John Maxwell, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And so today we're talking about the mirror.
The law of the mirror.
The law of the mirror. And in the book, because the book is not written to marriages, it's just, written for business, for personal growth,
But we're people, so then personal
that's
growth.
right. So we ought to be able to apply it to marriage. I'm going to move the camera a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, we switched sides, so we're
kind of
changing things up a little bit, so you all get to see this side of me today.
That's right. We discovered what our good side was.
Well, I wouldn't say that. It's just a different side.
So the law of the mirror says that you must see value in yourself and add value to yourself. In marriage, though, you must also learn to see value in your spouse as you see in yourself. There's that the scripture talks about that love others as you love yourself. And that to me is what I'm hearing when I think of this.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to cut you. I'm always starting to say something. I think though, when I think about a mirror, I think it's sorry, my earpiece is coming out. I'm so sorry. When we look in a mirror, we are seeing what we're actually seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So many times we in marriage, maybe it's like we have a picture in our head of what marriage should look like. But I think when you look in a mirror, when we look at each other, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
We should be reflecting back to each other that picture of marriage that we've created for our unique space in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the mirror in that context is more than just what do I see when I look at myself in the mirror. It's a reflecting back between us.
Right.
It's a reflection back. When I look at you, I should see me. When you look at me, you should see you, because we are one flesh.
Right. Yeah. And what I think of it is, it's like an individual self-esteem that we bring together to create a marriage self-esteem.
Oh, that's good. I like that. A marriage self-esteem.
And so it's our responsibility on ourselves to not put so much pressure on our spouse to make me feel good. But at the same time, it seems like what I've learned over the years, we hold our spouse's self-esteem. We can, it's really hard for you to have a high self-esteem if I'm looking down on you.
Oh, so true.
If, and we always talk about values and things like that. But I always notice that, if those values are getting, what's the word? Not validated, but violated. It becomes, very difficult for me to feel good about myself.
Sure. Oh, that's a really good point.
I feel questioned. I feel
Yeah.
like, well, I must not be enough.
Yeah, that's really good.
And
Oh, that's
so,
a good point. So if we've talked about those before, those core values, but if they are
mhm,
being violated, what you're saying is that actually can contribute to a lower self-esteem because you're unsure.
right.
Whereas if your core values are being um, validated and
Hmm.
protected and enhanced, we've talked about that before,
Right.
then it actually helps you to have a better self-esteem. So then when I look in the mirror of our marriage,
Hmm.
if I start to see your self-esteem, what I'm seeing might be a reflection of my own.
Right.
If we're, kind of back and forth on that, I don't know if I said that
Well,
well,
yeah,
but
because here's the thing. If our self-esteem is high, we have no problem being supportive
hmm
of other people.
hmm
But when we start to feel like we're not as worthy or
hmm
that someone doesn't appreciate us and we start to get in that and it starts to lower our self-esteem, then we start to tear someone else down
mm
instead of picking them up
yeah.
because we have to bring you down to our level.
And
You
that can
know,
happen in marriage, unfortunately. Is that what you're
oh, it
saying?
happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So talking
Yeah.
about,
That's very true. It's very sad. It kind of starts to play off each other. It's
yeah,
like, I don't like what I see, so then I'm going to make sure that you don't look any better in the mirror.
right, right. I mean, we've discussed that in the past. Until I realized the calling that was on your life and
Mhm,
realized that I can't be at my true best and fulfill my calling if I hold you back from your
mhm.
calling.
That's so good.
Then I was actually doing that with you, and it was
Mhm,
because I felt like less of a man, less of
mhm,
the leader
mhm.
if you were out front.
And it's interesting too, because in that season, I really struggled with confidence in that area of ministry.
Mm.
Really struggled with it. So it's interesting that you just brought that to
Yeah,
light because that could have been part of
it's all kinds of weird things out there. So I've heard things like self talk and uh, affirmations and all that stuff.
You know what I just thought of when you said that?
No telling.
That Saturday Night, and I never watched Saturday
Doggone
Night
it,
Live,
people like,
but because he sat in front of the mirror, right? And he's like, I am so
yeah,
perfect, or whatever he said. I don't
yeah,
know. So that's taking it, that's a little too far, but that was more of
right,
that. But there is some truth to um, how we talk to ourselves is also how we're going to see ourselves, and how
right.
we see ourselves is then reflected back into our spouse.
Would you say it's better if I say good things to you, or is it worse when I say bad things?
For me, it's better when you say good things because you're telling me what you see that you like or that's good. You're affirming the
Hmm.
good. If you're telling me what's wrong with me, then it just makes me
Right,
try to fix that and try to focus on that. And we don't want to be problem focused.
right.
Even our own self esteem, we want to be forward focused in that.
But like I would think, and I agree. I think the most powerful thing in the world is someone affirming and showing you that you are enough, and I believe in you, and
Hmm
things like that. But for they say for every one negative, it takes 10 positives to pull
Oh, I
somebody
see where
back
you're going with
out.
that. I thought you meant personally, me
So,
personally.
well, I
Okay.
did actually. I was just so I'm to me, I don't know if in the broad scheme of things, if either one is better or worse. I'm just,
Mm,
I think we got to really watch what we say and how we say it more than what would I really don't know where I want to go with that. I thought I did, but no, as far as just that little piece there, I just noticed that, man, when I say something to you that's demoralizing, or
mhm,
that, if I was just come at you, hey, how do you like about this shirt? Yeah, you
mhm,
know, you can see the
mm,
pain and everything
okay.
like that. And it takes more than one time of like,
Mhm.
I didn't mean it that
Oh,
way.
it's
What I
true.
meant to say, it's going
Mhm,
to take more and more to pull you out of
mhm,
that. So I guess I probably have to land on, I think it's worse when we say bad things to ourselves and to our spouse.
mm,
I think it's harder to pull ourselves back up.
mhm,
It takes more effort to get up than
mhm.
it does to fall down.
Probably.
So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Okay. I still like it when you say good things to me.
Oh, I think, well, here's the thing.
I guess what I mean
I
by
think the
that,
good things are vital all the time, But if I do say the one bad thing, it takes
Yeah, I think we're
multiple.
both coming at this
That's where I'm
at the
trying to go.
right perspective. I think we're both talking about two different things
Yeah.
because I think that so often I don't see the good in myself.
Mhm.
So when you reveal that, when you say something good and affirming and like, you did really good, you're really good at that, or man, you rock that. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more. But you know, I think it definitely, sometimes we don't see, we're talking about the mirror here.
Right.
We don't see ourselves the way God sees us.
Right.
You know, that's been my thing lately. So I think our spouse can actually be, you actually were that for me. I think our spouse can be the way that God can begin to use words to show your spouse how he
Right.
actually sees us individually, which then obviously strengthens our marriage.
Mhm.
So
Definitely. And I think to go right along with the self-talk or the paired self-talk
the paired self-talk, I like that. Yeah.
is from, we got to stop comparing our marriage to other
Mhm.
people's marriages.
Mhm.
You know,
I think
and-
that's where a lot of the dialogue that's negative comes from, because we
Yeah.
do get a picture of what we think we're supposed to be.
Mhm.
And then so we're like, why don't you ever? Well, Susie Q down the street, her husband always, and you
Right.
never. And
we live that, I would call it a Facebook marriage.
yeah.
You know, and it's all of a sudden, here's all my best, all my highlights, but we don't see the broken glass. We don't see, you know, the yelling and screaming and all that stuff,
Yeah.
you know, of the other people's marriages, because they are going to be on their
Yeah.
best behavior. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
We do want to put our best face forward, even on
Sure.
Facebook, you know, but I think that that's okay. But it's our responsibility not to compare our marriage to that.
right.
I think, you know, I think that's really the fine line between that, is that it's not wrong to put your best face forward, but it is wrong to think that I have to be that face.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's so, I don't know if demoralizing would be the right word, but when you really feel like you are just falling so short because all you do
It's
is compare.
deflating for sure.
Deflating.
Yeah, I know. I always have a weird word, don't I?
No, you got a better word. I use, you know, I practice words every day, but I still pull out the wrong
But
ones.
I reuse those words every day. No, I'm just kidding, because I do have the gift of the gap. So, so yeah, I think the comparison is definitely something that's pretty critical to a marriage, is to not get into that. Because another thing, it just segues right into this. I think we've talked about this a little bit. I actually have a quote I want to read, but it creates a limiting belief when we're comparing. You can see how this starts to pile up. You know, your self-talk isn't right. You're only talking about the negative. You don't know what's good about yourself. So it's always that. And then you throw in comparing yourself to what I wish you were like, or what you wish I was like in our marriage. Then all of a sudden you begin over time to build a very limiting belief about, well, we could never be like that marriage. Well, you know, we got married at 17. We could never be like that. So that limiting belief then actually creates a lid on what we can do with our marriage. And that's what Charles Schwab, of all people, I don't know how this quote came. Well, it was in Maxwell's book. When a man puts a limit on what he will do, excuse me, he places a limit on what he can do. Let me say that again without choking. When a man puts a limit on what he will do, he places a limit on what he can do. So in our marriage, if we say that, well, I could never be like that, so then I won't even try to do X, Y, Z. So we put a limit on that. And what we're doing actually is, you know, we talk about that God has a purpose for our marriage. He created us on purpose for a purpose. And that purpose is to be a visible display of his unlimited riches and grace. Like, it is literally for us to be the picture of what we can't see to this world. And our marriage is a picture of that. But when we have a limiting belief, then we're not even going to touch the potential of what our marriage was created to be.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a very strong limiting belief, we've mentioned this before in other podcasts, is that's who I am.
Oh, yeah.
So we just settle for the way we've always been, as that's who we are, when that's not who we are. We are created in the image of Christ. If that's the case, to set any limitation on who we can be is a limiting belief.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because let's think, you and I are in such a beautiful place in our marriage right now. We weren't always this way.
Yeah, when this podcast is over, it could change.
It could change, subject to change according to availability of our moods, right? Not really. But one of the things, looking back on our 38 years in this specific space right here, is that there have been seasons when one of us was striving for growth and the other wasn't. But what we, for some reason, had the ability to not do is to pull the other one down. The whole law of the lid. I love the picture of, you put a bunch of crabs in a jar. You put a lid on it at first. When one crab tries to get to the top of that jar, he can't, so he falls back down. Well, then you take the lid off. Well, instead of them all crawling out, what happens? If somebody tries to crawl up and out, they pull it. The rest of the crabs pull them down. So I think in marriage that can happen. You get a spouse who, let's talk about, they want to grow financially, in fitness, spiritually, in their own personal development. How many marriages have we mentored and coaches where this has been, all of them that I can think of, this has been a core turning point when they realized, oh, I don't have to be threatened that my spouse wants to grow and is trying to achieve something or grow beyond where we are. It's not a slam against me. And maybe I don't go at the same pace, but I sure don't need to pull them down, because if you can continue to go up, eventually you're going to tell me how to get out of that jar. I get to go with you.
Right.
And that's where I think in marriage we have to be very, very intentional about in this space when we're looking at that. When I start to see you change, it's not the time for me to say, well, you're not the person I married anymore.
Right.
Well, if it's bad, then okay, we need to have that conversation. But if it's because all of a sudden you're being threatened because I am trying to achieve something that will help both of us, put the brakes on that and start to talk about what that looks like.
That's really good. You don't put crabs in a jar. You put fleas in a jar. So you combined your two stories. It's fine.
So good at that.
The only reason I brought that up is because I want to talk about the fleas for a second. Because with fleas, if you put them in a jar and you put the lid on, they will jump. A flea can jump like 30 feet.
Oh, that's right. It is the flea.
So if you put fleas in a jar and you put the lid on, they have no problem getting out of the jar without the lid. But you put the lid on, they will jump, hitting that lid.
That lid, that's what it is. I should always let you tell the story.
You're 100% right on the deal. It's just put crabs in a basket, not a jar. So after a while, though, they become almost trained to a certain extent. That you can take the lid off and the fleas won't even jump out of the jar, even though they can go 30 feet.
Like that's their limiting belief.
Right.
Yeah. That's really the better illustration, because there's been a lid put on their limit. They're like, well, that's as far as I can go because I've tried it before. And
so it's our job as married couples, if we put the lid on, we have to remove the lid for our spouse and then help them understand they can jump higher.
Yeah.
And what's really best in a marriage is if you never put the lid on.
I was going to say, that was going to be my point. You made it for me. It's like, well, what if we don't ever put the lid on our spouse? Right. So I think that you've done I think you alluded to that a minute ago when you said, when you realized some of the calling that I've had on my life, potentially, you could have kept the lid put on that. And I would have honored you in that, because I love you, and I would have honored whatever direction that you felt like that was supposed to go. Not because you're my Lord and ruler, but because I honor that, worship you. But, to me, that's a whole different story. Yeah. But I think that was a very good example of that. That season, you could have really decided to, because I was definitely seeing some traction in an area I wanted to go.
Right. You
could have been very, very jealous of that and said, well, I don't get that same opportunity, so then you're not going to. And that's the crab thing.
Here's the thing. The temptation to do that was great.
Yeah, I know.
Here I was going to the Maxwell coaching seminars and learning how to speak and all this stuff. And then it's almost immediately we started seeing, when we would speak at church in our little small group thing that we did, you would get all the recognition. When I would speak, no one would ever say a word. You would setting up the women's conferences and getting to speak and have other speakers, opportunity there.
Platform for that, yeah.
I wasn't getting those things.
Yeah.
And so it was so tempting just to say, no, you don't need to do this at all. But then when
I'm the one that's going to speaking class.
I'm the one that's working on this. I'm the one that's,
Yeah, I know.
paying high dollars,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it was very tempting to put a lid on, like I've done in previous years before that.
Mhm.
But I just have always been grateful from then that I was able that God showed me while I stood in the back of the room working the sound,
Mhm.
that this is something He put on you,
Mhm.
and you will never fulfill that because you would have honored me had I stood in the way, and so
Yeah.
I could have held you back from fulfilling the calling God had put on your life.
Well, and I think that that's helped both of us grow. That's kind of that's some true life story there.
Yeah.
But I think that was, it was definitely a very difficult struggle, because my struggle was, well, why would God call me to do this if I think it was learning that it's like, why would He call me to put this calling on my life and then give me somebody who
Right.
wouldn't be supportive of that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things in marriage like that. What if God's called somebody to be a doctor and the other spouse is like, I'm not supportive. I don't want you to be gone. So, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of wrestling with that.
Right.
I think it goes back to communication. But again, we're talking about this mirror here. So if we look at each other, my personal growth is reflected in you and your personal growth is reflected in me. And then it helps our marriage to thrive, because that is now a much bigger picture of God's purpose that He wants us to do together.
Yeah. And one thing I started doing that really, I think, helped at this time was taking just little small disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And, so what I would do is I would remind myself, I can't be all I can be without her being all she can be, because we are one.
Yeah.
And so just that little discipline of an affirmation to myself. Yeah. This is what I want.
That self-talk, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is what I want. So this is what we have to do.
That's really good. And I think so many times we do get stuck with, this is overwhelming. This is way too much for me to change. You might be listening right now and thinking, Steph Grant, you have no clue. We're such a hot mess. I'm like, yeah, great. You're alive and you're breathing and you're still together. So decide on one small thing that you can do. Build the discipline, because discipline is something we seem to really lack. As adults, we think we can do whatever we want anytime we want, and then it doesn't really matter how it affects somebody else, but it does. But another thing too that can help you in this area is to celebrate small victories. So when you set a discipline that you want to do daily, something small that you can do daily, then celebrate when you do it.
Right.
I mean, we get so stuck on the big accolades and the big things, but I could sit there and tell our listeners a laundry list of things in that season when you said you got no acknowledgement of, like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here thinking there was so much good that was happening in you in that season. So learn to celebrate that together. I could have been better at telling you, yeah, but babe, all the things, I won't go into them because we don't have time, but there was a lot that helped me to get to where I was. Without that, I would never be where I am at today, without the things that you brought to me so that was a victory, even though you felt like it wasn't. So celebrate when you succeeded, because you've already succeeded, because you've already took the step to practice that discipline. Yeah. You're already a success.
And what you can do is when you're looking at your spouse and it's as a mirror, it doesn't mean that you're seeing the exact reflection of you, but yet you can see a partial reflection of you. And I think, like, the reflection is you were reflecting the speaking part that I wanted. And I was starting to reflect the leadership
that I wanted. Absolutely. That's so good.
So I didn't, but you didn't even realize it at the time.
Yeah.
It was,
that's so good.
It was like, I was seeing what I wish I had and not seeing that where God was making me to the person that you wish you had. Yeah.
Well, that goes back to what we've talked so many times before, is that transformation, right? Be who God called you to be. And in being, you will be everything that you need to be.
That's good. That's a way to be.
Yeah, way to be. No, it's cool. So hopefully that maybe that's a good picture for those out there, that, because we're different. Nobody in marriage is the same. No marriage is the same, and no two individuals in a marriage are the same. So always, always, always pull away from that and begin to say, when I look in the mirror, who do I want, my spouse to see, and what do I see in myself that my spouse is reflecting in our
Yeah.
marriage? And there should be some connection there, and it should help encourage you. And then that's going to help you to embrace, I think, a positive vision for your marriage. We talk about dreaming a lot. We talk about the importance of having a vision in a marriage, and that can trip a lot of people up because we don't really know how to dream. We've done podcasts. We will do more on that. But I think that in all this conversation that we've just had, the mirror, the law of the mirror, actually should then give us a picture of a vision of what our marriage is going towards.
Yeah.
There should be some futuristic elements to that. I don't know.
There is no growth if you're not expanding the vision that you have right now.
Yeah.
Because you're there.
It's that lid again, right?
You create the
you're
lid
just there.
by not taking the time to dream, create a vision of what you want the future to look like. So yeah, I really like that. That's good.
And all this stays in the context too of learning to live in and building on your core values and the common ground that we've talked about before. Hopefully our listeners understand the layering. There's layering in all this.
Right.
So you're not going to do anything with this law if you don't even have a grasp on your core values and the common ground that can build.
Yeah. We'll wind it down with this. But one thing that I noticed, and kind of goes back to the small discipline, and is when you bring me a dream, when you start to think outside the box or whatever, my first thing is think, then listen, then think, then respond.
So good.
So when you say, "Hey, I got something for you we just had a talk this morning. You say, "Hey, I'm going to discuss something with you, and I don't mean it in a bad way." Well, the first thought can be, they say that they mean it in a bad way, but instead it's think, is she on my side? For me, against me? He's for me. So now I want to listen. So listen to what you had to say, then think, how do I respond to let you know what I heard? And I'm not against it. Now I fail at that every day because it's a learning process. It's something
it's a daily discipline that you do
daily
practice.
Discipline that I am working on. Yeah. So we'll wind it down with that. This was the law of the mirror on the 15 laws to a thriving marriage. And we will be back in another week with our next law.
The next law.
We are looking forward to that. We hope that you enjoyed this. We hope you got something out of it. It will be on YouTube. It'll be on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Anchor, and the Apple Podcast. I guess what they call that one now.
It's just Apple Podcasts. Yeah.
Anyway, Apple Podcasts. And so check it out. Share it with a friend. And we will see you in another week.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Man.